Okay, everyone, I think we've solved it thanks to Ephraim. He's our hero.
Thank you very much. Everything's fine.
Okay, so now
Okay.
I'm going to start recording.
Can I hang up? You're gonna hang up?
Wait. I just want to see. I'm going to start recording and make sure it's okay.
Make sure you're unmuted, huh? Okay,
Yeah.
You're good.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
hang up.
Okay, thanks again to Ephraim. Okay, welcome everyone to a new class tonight. Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Hasidut. We just finished our series on Introduction to Maaseh Bereshit. I'm still working on future ideas, but I wanted to dedicate this class to Rosh Chodesh Shvat. We're only one day after Rosh Chodesh, and God willing, I have some very, very deep and profound ideas to give over about this month, God willing. So what we're going to do is, the way I'm going to go about this is really the way we go about every month, based on the Sefer Yetzirah, where we see that every month has a constellation connected to it, has what's called a chush, a sense that's connected to the month, has a letter, and has a tribe. Those are the four aspects that we're going to be dealing with tonight. I just, as an introduction, the Sefer Yetzirah, happy birthday, Jerry. Happy birthday. In Sefer Yetzirah, the 22 Hebrew letters are divided into three divisions: 3, 7, and 12. And these are very, very important. The 3 are the Aleph, Mem, and Shin. These are called the 3 mother letters. And they manifest in the level of Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. So in the world, the Shin is fire, the Mem is water, and the Aleph is air. In the level of Shana, meaning time, these are the 3 seasons. We're used to talking about 4 seasons, but in Israel, fire is summer, water is winter, and the Aleph is spring and fall. For those who have lived in Israel or who do live in Israel know that sometimes spring and fall are very short. We seem sometimes to go from winter right into summer. So that's the Aleph. It's like 2 intermediate seasons of spring and fall. And in the body, so the Shin is the head, the Mem is the digestive organs, Mayim, and the Aleph is the air, is the lungs. So Shin, Aleph, and then below is the Mem. You'll see why I'm saying all this to understand our introduction to Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Then we have 7 letters. They're called the double letters. These are the letters that can be pronounced in 2 different ways. The first one is a bet, but it can also be pronounced vet. Many of these, we don't have a strong tradition Many Sephardim have a stronger tradition of the double pronunciation of these letters, but it's Bet Gimel Daled Chaf Pei Resh Tav. These are the 7 letters that can be pronounced in 2 different ways. And this also goes according to Olam, Shana, and Nefesh, space, time, and body/soul. So 7 in Olam are the 7 planets. In ancient times, they didn't know about Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune. So the system was a system of 7 planets. In time, these 7 letters correspond to the 7 days of the week. And in the soul/body, it's what's called the 7 openings of the face. 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. 7 openings of the head. And in, that's Shana, Olam, Shana, Nefesh with the 7. Now, I'm saying all of this. Then there are what are called 12 simple letters. These are the letters that are not the mother letters, and they're not the double letters. They're all the letters that remain. And there are 12 of them. So in the world, this corresponds to the 12 constellations. In time, Shana, this relates to the 12 months of the year. And in the soul, Nefesh, this relates to the 12 senses. So this is just a general introduction to understand the signs for each month. What I'm about to say is very, very important. We have a lunar calendar. It goes according to the moon, according to the months. And therefore, every month is its own energy, which is very different than a solar calendar. In a solar calendar, there's far less emphasis on the energy of a particular month. You have the 4 seasons, all kinds of secular holidays, but the months themselves kind of blend together. In other words, winter just kind of blends together of November, December, January, February, March. There's not this special energy of each month. The Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar, and so every month has its signs. And that's what the Sefer Yetzirah gives over, that each month is connected to a constellation, to a month, to a tribe. Actually, the tribes are not in the Sefer Yetzirah. This is a later Kabbalistic insight. So with that introduction, we're going to explore the new month of Shvat. So the first we'll look at is the constellation. The constellation is Aquarius. In Hebrew, though, it's called Deli. We'll call it even the water carrier, or the one who dispenses water, who gives water. Deli itself is a bucket. In modern Hebrew, a Deli is a bucket. But in the constellations, in Hebrew, it's called Deli, but it means not just a bucket. It means a bucket with water in it that gives sustenance, gives life to other people. We're going to see later its very, very important connection to Aquarius and different traditions about Aquarius that will dovetail with Jewish tradition. So we know that we have this idea, Ein Mayim Ela Torah. There's no water other than Torah, meaning that when water is mentioned in the Torah, it is an allusion, a hint to Torah itself. So here we have a Dali. The month of Shvat is recognized, is symbolized by this idea of the water carrier who's giving water to others. And if the water is the Torah, so then we understand that there's something about this month that has to do with the giving of Torah. And here we see an incredible connection. It's one of the few dates that are actually mentioned in the Torah. When we learn the Torah, it's usually not mentioning year or month. There are exceptions, but one of them is that the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, explicitly in the Torah says that Moshe began teaching the book of Devarim on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. So that's our deep connection here. The deep connection is that Moshe, in a certain way, he is the water carrier. What does the name Moshe mean? Mina mayim mishitiu. He was drawn from the water. And in Kabbalah and Chassidut, here the simple is he was drawn out of the Nile by the daughter of Pharaoh. But on a much higher level, we learn that the soul of Moshe is being drawn from the actual source of Torah itself. And that is why he is the one who is we'll call it the middleman, the one who God has chosen to bring the Torah down into the world. He's drawn from the waters of Torah. So here we just see really an amazing connection. Now, when we look at the 12 months and the 12 constellations, we see that they're connected to the 4 elements: fire, earth, air, and water. So when you go through the 12 months and the 12 constellations, it runs in that order 3 times. In other words, the first month of the year, Nisan, is a fire sign, Aries. It's a fire sign. Then we have Taurus, which is Iyar. That is an earth sign. Fire, earth, air is Sivan, the twins, and water is the next month, which is Tammuz. But then it repeats itself 3 times: fire, earth, air, and water. What's significant here is the 3 air signs are Sivan, Tishrei, and Shvat. In Sivan, the Torah is given to Am Yisrael at Mount Sinai. In Tishrei, because of the golden calf, the breaking of the first tablets, the second tablets are brought down by Moshe on the 10th of Tishrei, which was in essence the first Yom Kippur. So also an air sign. And the third air sign is Shvat, when Moshe begins to teach the book of Devarim. The whole book of Devarim takes place during 37 days, from Rosh Chodesh Shvat to Zayin Adar. That's when Moshe passes away. So 37 is Gematria Halev, the heart. The Deuteronomy in Hebrew is Devarim. And so the expression of the sages, Chazal, is words that come from the heart enter the heart. So here we see something very, very interesting. We know that at Har Sinai, we received, in a sense, two Torahs, Torah shebichtav and Torah shebal peh, the written Torah and the oral Torah. This is something that we have mentioned many times. The written Torah without the oral Torah is impossible to understand. And in fact, especially once you get into translations, not only you can't understand it, but many times you come to opposite conclusions of what the Torah is actually teaching. So the written Torah without the oral Torah in a certain way is incomplete. But when we look at the history of the Jewish people, so we have the written Torah, and the oral Torah was literally oral for 1,500 years. From Mount Sinai till Yehuda Nasi compiled the Mishnah is literally 1,500 years. And it was all oral. And then Yehuda Nasi made the decision that if it wasn't written down, it might be lost. So he wrote down the Mishnah in approximately 200 CE. And then the Gemara, the Talmud, is compiled over approximately 300 years, from 200 to 500, till it was codified by Rav Ashi. So the point I'm trying to make here is, first we have the written Torah, and the oral Torah is the oral tradition of what it means. And to our day, right now, we are involved in the oral Torah. The oral Torah was, in a sense, never codified. Oral Torah means the continual discussions, insights, chidushim, innovative ideas about the Torah. So here we see something interesting with Moshe beginning the book of Devarim on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, because the book of Devarim is fundamentally different than the first four books. It's called Mishneh Torah, which means the repetition of the Torah, because we see that Moshe is repeating many of the mitzvot, and he is giving over the history to a new generation. This is the 40th year in the desert. Israel is preparing to come into the Holy Land. And so Moshe goes over in actually great detail what it was like receiving the Torah. That's why in the second book of Devarim, we have the 10 commandments repeated. And he describes all of the phenomenon that happened with the giving of the Torah. He also goes into great detail about the sin of the spies and many, many new mitzvot that have not been revealed. And that's why, in a little bit of a sense, when people say the book of Devarim, Moshe is just going over the same mitzvot again, is a misnomer. There's actually more new mitzvot revealed in the book of Devarim than ones that he goes back over. But the point I want to make here is something interesting. The sages say that the book of Devarim is fundamentally different. And the expression is that Moshe mipi atzmo. He said over the book of Devarim from his own perspective, his own mouth. So many people say that this, in a sense, is the true beginning of the oral Torah. because it's not God dictating to Moshe, say this and reveal this. There are exceptions in the book of Devarim, but in great measure, Moshe is just speaking from his heart. He is giving over his, call it his last will and testament. So here you have the oral Torah. Again, mipi atzmo, from his own mouth, he is giving over the book of Devarim. So that we could ask, well, I thought the 5 books of Moses are all divine and are all given by God. And so that's the unique quality of Devarim, that Moshe had become such a clear channel. And the expression of the Gemara is that the Shekhinah spoke through the mouth of Moshe. He's virtually invisible. He is just a channel. It is coming from him. It is his perspective. It is his words. But the chiddush here is, in the end, God says, this is exactly how I would have said it, as it were. So here we see, usually the written Torah precedes the oral Torah. But here on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, there's a whole new aspect of Torah that is being given over, where the oral Torah is then transformed into the written Torah. It becomes the 5th book of the Chumash. And so what begins with Moshe giving it over from his own mouth, his own perspective, God, in a sense, says, these are actually my words and my thoughts and my perspective. That's how clear a vessel Moshe became. And that's why we say, when we compare Moshe to the other prophets, we say that Moshe saw through an aspaklaria hami'ira, through a clear pane. And the other prophets through a aspaklaria lo me'ira, a somewhat frosted pane. You could still see all the images, and you could see fairly clearly, but it wasn't absolutely clear. Only Moshe, of all the prophets, saw in such a clear way. So here, I'm just trying to give us the energy of Rosh Chodesh Shvat. There's something new happening. And that, I have to say, tonight, I'm not going to go into Tu B'Shvat that deeply. But it's obvious, as we're going to see shortly, that the new thing that is happening in Rosh Chodesh Shvat, that's why Beit Shammai in the Mishnah says, what we call Tu B'Shvat, in other words, the new year of the trees is Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Hillel said it's the 15th of Shvat, it's Tu B'Shvat. And we hold like Beit Hillel. But what Shammai was saying, he was very, very connected, because he was connecting the giving of Mishnah Torah from Moshe, because it was something new with the idea of the new year of the trees. Now, it's possible that next week I will be giving over Torah about Tu B'Shvat. I'm not clear yet, because we always share in our email a Tu B'Shvat edition, and there is already a lot of material that I've given over literally decades that we'll be sharing. Anyways, let's continue. Now, if you take the letters of the word Dali. Again, that's the name of the constellation of Aquarius in Hebrew, the water bucket, the bucket full of water. And you permute the letters, it comes out Yud Lamed Daled, which is Yeled, a child, or to give birth, Yalid, to give birth. And so here again, this is a beautiful connection that there is something happening new in the month of Shvat, that Chidushei Torah are ready to be shared with the world. The water carrier is about, like Moshe, he began sharing in a certain way the oral Torah, a deeper connection to the Torah that we would not be able to access if we're only learning the written Torah. Okay, so now I want to introduce the letter of the month. The letter of the month is Tzadi. But it's very important that the Arizal called the letter Tzadi, Tzadik, the righteous one. And again, just because we only have so much time, but anyone who has Rav Ginsburg's book on the Hebrew letters, and the letter Tzadi, the whole letter is intrinsically connected to the idea of Tzadik, the righteous one. And so one of the verses, when we were learning Maaseh Bereshit, just maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were learning about the pillars on which the earth stands. So there were ideas that there are 3 pillars, there are 12 pillars, there are 7 pillars. And the last opinion was Tzaddik Yesod Olam. The tzaddik is the foundation of the world, is the pillar on which the whole world rests. And so one of the verses about a tzaddik in the book of Mishlei is Pri Tzaddik Eitz Chaim. The fruit of the tzaddik is a tree of life. Now, we know that every time we take the Torah out, Monday, Thursdays, and Shabbat, and we return it, so we quote another verse from Mishlei, Eitz Chaim hi lemachazikim ba, that the Torah is a tree of life for those who grasp onto it. So here, the Torah and the tree of life are synonymous. And so the Pri Tzadik Eitz Chaim, the fruit of the tzaddik, is the tree of life. So what is the fruit of the tzaddik? There are different opinions. Some say it's the students of the tzaddik. They are the fruits. The teacher, the Rebbe, the Rebbitzin, whatever the leader is, their fruit is their students. The students are the fruit. Just like our children are even more literally our fruit. But here we see, obviously, a connection of the letter of the month with the idea of fruit. Now, obviously, this will be manifest on Tu B'Shvat. The whole idea of Tu B'Shvat, the customs of Tu B'Shvat, whether those people do what's called a Tu B'Shvat Seder, do a whole ritual based around how we do a Pesach Seder, or in the Halacha, it just mentions that it's a custom to eat the fruit on Tu B'Shvat, especially the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael, and to praise the land, to praise the fruit and give thanks and gratitude to our connection to the land of Israel. Obviously, when we were in exile for 2,000 years, that was it was like a way to connect to Eretz Yisrael. Here, we're back in Eretz Yisrael, and Tu B'Shvat has grown in importance over the last 100 years tremendously, because we're back in Eretz Yisrael, and we're not talking symbolically about the beautiful fruits of Eretz Yisrael. We're here, we're growing them, we're eating them, we're taking meiser on them, we're tithing them. So here's just a beautiful connection between the letter of the month and we'll call it the main day of the month, the holiday of Tu B'Shvat. Okay, now I want to reconnect to the constellation of the month, which is Aquarius. We have a phrase from the Chazal, from the sages, Ein mazal liYisrael. This is part of a whole discussion, and it's sometimes sounds a little bit contradictory, but despite what many people think, the Talmud is full of references to astrology all over the place, meaning that there is an accepted idea that there is influence by the constellations. There is an influence of the sun, of the moon, the stars, and the planets. Other people, this is where, in a certain way, idol worship sprung up, when people started attributing independent rulership to these different planets. In ancient times, much of what we call idol worship was connected to the stars. And for the ancient people, astrology and religion was almost the same thing. Judaism doesn't go to those lengths, actually far from it. Nonetheless, the Talmud does recognize influences from the constellations, the planets. Yet, ultimately, they say, Ein mazal Yisrael. There is no rulership of these planetary entities over Israel. Now, this means, though, that one is connected to Torah. We're taught that if one is not connected to Torah, then these influences grow. When they say Ein mazal Yisrael, that is assuming that a person is connected to God and connected to Torah. The Baal Shem Tov, in a very famous drasha, says on Ein mazal Yisrael, he says, the Ein is the mazal of Israel, meaning the Ein Sof, the infinite one, is the mazal of Israel. Meaning, of course, we're influenced, but only by God, not by the stars. But we recognize, for anyone who knows the prayers of Shabbat morning, Kel Baruch, Gadol De'ah. No, that's during the week, excuse me. Kel Adon. We mentioned the influence of the stars. So there is an influence, but the Baal Shem was saying that influence is only, they're servants of God. The only real influence that we have is the infinite one, the Ein Sof. Despite that, probably the commentary who's the most quoted about wisdom of the months is called the Bnei Yissachar. The Bnei Yissachar wrote extensively about the energies of each month. And most of it is based exactly what we're doing from the Sefer Yetzirah, on the sense, on the letter, on the constellation, on the tribe, and more connections. Those are the ones that we're concentrating on right now. So he said, the Bnei Yissachar said, even though Ein Mazal Yisrael, even though there is no planetary influences over Israel, he said that if, in a certain way, if we could choose one month that would be the most connected to the soul, destiny, and history of Israel, it's Shvat. It's this month. And one of the reasons that he said that is we know from secular astrology, and there is something to it. Again, because certain aspects of astrology are synonymous with astronomy. So there are constellations, and we move in and out of different called houses of the constellations. So if for those who remember in the 60s, there was a very, very famous song about we are about to enter into the age of Aquarius. I think it was the fifth dimension, if I remember correctly, that released this song. It was very, very popular because it became associated with the idea of New Age. The New Age, whatever that means, movement that began with the hippies in the 60s was very connected to this idea that we are entering into the age of Aquarius. But there's something real about that. There is an astronomical reality. It's not just like a nice song, that we are moving into the planetary influence of Aquarius. And so the Bnei Yissachar, though, makes an obvious connection. Why is this month the most associated with the Jewish people? Is because the age of Aquarius, when it's talked about in secular terms, is synonymous with the Messianic era. That is as it were, the vision of the age of Aquarius is what we talk about as the age of Mashiach. And so this is a very, very deep connection that the Bnei Yissachar is pointing out with the connection. And so we'll go back to, so the Hebrew for Aquarius is the Dali, is the water. And so this is very, very connected to the idea that we have mentioned in different contexts many times, and those who are connected to Rav Ginsburg is what he calls the fourth revolution. And the fourth revolution is it's time to teach the whole world Torah, because we are nearing the Messianic age. And one of the descriptions of what the Mashiach has to accomplish, including in the discussions of the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, is that the Mashiach will bring peace and harmony and cooperation and Torah to the entire world. That is the job description, along with gathering in the exiles, rebuilding the temple, fighting the final wars, introducing Torah in a way that the Jewish people accept it. And the last thing is, he will then do this to the whole world. He will introduce the Torah to the whole world. He is the water carrier. He is the one carrying the Dali of Aquarius into the Messianic era. Okay, so now I want to introduce the sense of the month. In the Sefer Yetzirah, it's written le'ita, which literally means to swallow. But like a number of the different senses in Sefer Yetzirah, it has a broader meaning. Everyone understands it as the sense of taste, which is connected to the sense of eating, which is connected to the sense of pleasure. So all of these are very, very connected to Tu B'Shvat. And again, either we will be learning about this next week, or you will receive a Tu B'Shvat edition that will discuss all of this. So the sense of this month, again, is really taste, eating, and pleasure. So we want to look at the connection here. So in one of the great Hasidic teachers, Leibele Eger, in his series of books called Torat Emet, he gives over the following idea. The holiday of Tu B'Shvat always happens either in the week of Parsha B'Shalach or right after. So this year, it comes, one second, give me a second. It comes on the Sunday night right after we read Parshat B'Shalach. What's the connection with Tu B'Shvat and B'Shalach? So I'm not going to go into this, but it's very interesting. If you look at the whole Torah and you try to see how many parshas are trees mentioned. So you have a good handful, but there are 54 Torah portions. So it's really only a handful. In Parshat B'Shalach, trees come up twice. Once when we crossed the Red Sea, we came to water, it was bitter, we couldn't drink it. And God says, take a tree and throw it in the water and sweeten the waters. So this is symbolic. The tree is the tree of life. The tree of life is the Torah. And that is what has the power to sweeten reality. And then once they leave this place, they come to a place called Elim, where it says there were 12 springs of water and 70 date palms. Again, very symbolic. The 12 springs of water for the 12 tribes, the 70 date palms for the 70 faces of the Torah. But Leibele Eger points out that there's something else in the Parsha that's hinting to Tu B'Shvat. And it's something that we would ordinarily not make the connection. At the end of Parsha B'Shalach, you have the whole incident of the war with Amalek. And that's when Amalek comes against Israel, and Moshe goes up on the mountain, and he holds up his hands in prayer, and we defeat Amalek. So Leibele Eger says, what's the connection here to Tu B'Shvat? Because again, Tu B'Shvat is always coming either in the week of B'Shalach or like right after. So he says, Bilam when he gives his prophecies about Amalek. So he says, Reshit Goyim Amalek. Amalek is the first of the nations. But he explains that Amalek represents what's called klipa, the shells around holiness, around light, around spirituality. And it's like a nut, that the shell is the klipa, and you have to break the shell to get to the fruit. So Leibel Eger says this is symbolic of our relationship between physical and spiritual. And he says this is, when we're looking for the mystical meanings of Tu B'Shvat, the whole idea of eating. Remember, that's the sense of this month, is eating, and eating is connected to pleasure. So he's saying that the kavanot of Tu B'Shvat that we're supposed to incorporate every year, every day, every meal, is that our relationship to physicality is we have to break the klipa that is surrounding our relationship with physicality in order to reveal the spark of spirituality that is animating all physicality. It's very similar to what science now says, that all matter is energy. Well, if you don't relate to it, all we see is material reality. We're not even connected to the energy. But if we're connected to what material reality really is, then we connect to the energy. Same thing with physicality and spirituality. And so that is one of the secrets of making blessings, especially over food, is that food is one of the most material realities that we have. Most people don't just eat 3 meals a day. We're drinking all day. We're snacking all day. It's like constant. That's how God made us. But if we don't look for the spiritual spark, then in a certain way, we eat like an animal. We're not all that different than an animal. And so that's why so many Jewish laws and customs around eating are there to help us to break the klipa, to break the Amalek around spirituality, to get to the essence. So that's a beautiful connection to the, I call it the inner dimension of Tu B'Shvat. And that's why the sense of this month is of eating. So we have a verse that says, Tzaddik ochel l'sova nafsho. A tzaddik eats for the satisfaction of his nefesh. So there's 2 ways to understand the nefesh. Some say it means for the body, meaning a tzaddik eats just what they need for the body. They've, in a certain way, conquered their desire to just eat and eat and eat for pure physical pleasure. A tzaddik eats what they need and transforms it into spiritual energy to do good in the world. Others say, tzaddik ochel l'sovat nafsho, that a tzaddik eats in a manner that he or she can extract from the physical food pure spiritual energy and turns it into energy to do good in the world. So that's just a very deep connection that Leibel Eger, it's a connection we wouldn't have naturally seen if you didn't point it out to us. It's a huge, innovative idea of this. Gives us three main ideas why Tu B'Shvat always comes out during B'Shalach. And I'm going to answer, I'm going to give another one, which either I will repeat later, but this is the essence of Tu B'Shvat, is what I'm about to say. According to tradition, what actually happens on Tu B'Shvat? The tradition is that the sap begins to run in the tree again, from the roots, begins to run up the trunk, which will then be actualized in buds and fruit. The buds, the flowers, and the eventual fruit. So that is what is actually happening on Tu B'Shvat. The sap begins to flow in the trees. I want to mention this year we've seen something I don't think I've ever seen. For weeks now, the almond trees are already in bloom. They always are the first tree. That's why they're called shkedia. Shkedia means to quicken. These are the quickest trees to bloom. It's usually in February. This year, Tu B'Shvat's the end of January, or actually it's February 1st. But usually they only start to bloom shortly before Tu B'Shvat. This year, because we had a warming period of months, it didn't get cold to like a couple of weeks ago. It was in the 80s throughout October and November. And so you have the almond trees already in bloom. In other words, the sap already began to rise. But in most trees, that's what happens on Tu B'Shvat. So then we'll ask again, what's the connection that Tu B'Shvat always comes out in B'Shalach? Well, what happens in B'Shalach, the beginning of the Parsha, is when we leave Israel. We go from slavery to freedom. Trees are going from dormancy to new life, to Chiyat HaMeitim. B'Shalach, we come out of Egypt. We cross the Red Sea. So this is a very, very deep connection for us on a personal level. Okay, so we looked at the constellation, we looked at the letter, we looked at the sense. But what does it mean to us? What it means to us is right now, new energy is starting to flow in the world. It's a real thing, but we have to internalize it. And if we internalize it, we'll see Tu B'Shvat is a full moon. What happens a month later? Purim, full moon. What happens a month later? Pesach, full moon. Tu B'Shvat begins a redemptive energy that, in a sense, climaxes with Pesach. Well, Pesach, we're celebrating coming out of Egypt. But here we see something very, very deep. In the Torah readings, we're coming out of Egypt during Tu B'Shvat. And that is the sap rising in the tree. That is the new redemptive energy that each and every one of us has the ability to connect to. I'm going to add one more thing because we started a little bit late. Also, a beautiful connection. The name Shvat is Shin Bet Tet. Well, we know that when you can exchange letters, Tet and Tav are exchangeable. So if you exchange a Tet for a Tav, what do you get? Shabbat. Shin Bet Tav. Shabbat. And this is connected in a very deep way to the idea of eating and pleasure. Because what we call the spiritual bliss of Shabbat, the experience of Shabbat is called oneg Shabbat, pleasure, the pleasure of Shabbat. But here we're going to see a tremendous secret is if you look at the way that we celebrate Shabbat. So first of all, the Zohar calls Shabbat Yom de Nishmata, the day of the soul. So one might think if it's the day of the soul, we should be involved all day long with davening, learning, meditating. That's it. It's a day of the soul. That's why, in a certain way, Yom Kippur is called Shabbat Shabbaton, the Shabbat of Shabbats. In a certain way, again, that's what we would expect. If it's a day of the soul, so Yom Kippur, in a certain way, is a day of the soul. We don't eat, we don't drink, no marital relations, we don't wear leather shoes, we don't anoint ourselves, we don't wash. In other words, we limit the physical. And yet, how do we celebrate Shabbat every week? This is might come as a surprise. Everyone knows this, but might not have thought of this. We celebrate Shabbat in the most physical of ways. We put on our best clothes. We clean our houses. We prepare the tastiest foods. For better or for worse, we eat more than we ever eat. We put out our best dishes. We have flowers. We hang around the table eating. We sleep more than we sleep. According to even the Talmud, it's the most appropriate time for marital relations. All of these things are the most physical things. And yet that's the way we celebrate Shabbat, which is the day of the soul. So this is the same idea that we're talking about here, that the sense of this month is eating, is taste, but it's pleasure. And so here we see that the Jewish attitude is l'chaim, is we don't refrain from the enjoyments of this world. But what we do is we try to do them in a spiritual manner, and we try to convert physicality into spiritual oneg. And that's why many people, including myself, on Shabbos, when I'm eating, so every few bites, you say, L'kavod Shabbos Chodesh, for the honor of the holy Shabbat. And there's no doubt this food tastes really good, and it's very physical, but it really creates spiritual oneg. So this is a little bit about Rosh Chodesh Shvat. We're right at the beginning of the month, and it will, in a certain way, climax on Tu B'Shvat. And so hopefully many of these ideas that we're discussing, everyone will remember them, this Tu B'Shvat, however you choose to celebrate it. And again, we will be sharing a Tu B'Shvat edition that has a lot of information, including a Tu B'Shvat Seder that people can print out and follow.